Welcome to Future Capital. Today, my name is Heather Desjardins. For those of you that don't know me, I'm part of the core leadership team at Future Capital. I'm Chief Experience Officer of Conscious Capital, and Lawrence is Chief of Staff here. I'm going to be introducing Lawrence, who will kick us off with a moment of silence, and he'll be introducing Patty Clower, who's leading our Attention Economy Working Group. And we're pleased to have you all join us today. This, as Lawrence said, this is webinar style, so we can't see you or hear you, but we would like to hear your questions or comments. So please feel free to add that in the chat or in the Q&A. And towards the end, we will bring all of those into our session today. And please make sure you stay tuned. We have a special presentation at the end. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Lawrence Ford. For those of you that don't know, Lawrence Ford is the CEO and founder of Conscious Capital Wealth Management and the founder and chairman of Future Capital. He has dedicated much of his life to being a bridge between the modern world of business and the ancient world of wisdom, which is why the Washington Post has dubbed him the Shaman of Wall Street. His goal is to promote the power of money in capital markets and to raise the consciousness of our species to make the world a better place. Lawrence?
Thank you, Heather, and good morning and good afternoon, because I see people in from all over the world, old friends, new friends, and I truly appreciate your attention for coming today. I know there's lots of choices and lots of people pulling at your attention these days, which is really the theme of our meeting today, which is the official launching of the Attention Economy Working Group. First, before I begin, I'd like to start with some formalities of making sure that I thank our partners, which is the World Academy of Art and Science, Gary Jacobs and Mila Povovich, who have been very instrumental in working with us as we go forward. Also, Chantaline Carpentier from the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and from Will Kennedy from the Office of Partnerships. Great deep friends for us and helping us do this important work we're doing out there in the world. So today we're going to be talking about the attention economy and launching our working group. So I want to just do a couple quick things. The first thing is I want to, for people who may be new to Future Capital, I want to talk to you about what we're all about, what we stand for and what we do. And then I would like to chat a little bit about the connection between the Attention Economy Working Group and how that fits in and how it's so important today. And there's an internal joke around here when I say I'll be brief, everybody laughs, but in this case I will be brief because we also have some really great participants and speakers today, and we want to hear your voice as well. So Future Capital is very simple. It works in the nexus of consciousness and capital. And what I mean by that are man's, our species, women's most powerful tools, which are capital, this external resource that we've created in recent history, and consciousness, meaning everything that comes and is manifested out in the world from our thoughts and the beginning of how things get manifested out into the world. For the first time, those two being put in the same room at the same time, we feel are the greatest levers, or as Buckminster Fuller said, the greatest trim tabs for us to make significant transformation in our world. Today we're going to be, and how do we operate as Future Capital? Very simply is we let ideas come to us. We let people who are action-based come together to gather individually, collaboratively, and move their ideas and their work out into the world. We do this by supporting. People come in on monthly calls and they talk about their work they're doing in the world, whether it be in the private or public sector, whether it be for-profit or nonprofit. One of the core principles of Future Capital for us is that if any problem is going to be solved, it is going to come from a different consciousness, stealing from one of the great minds of recent history. And in doing so, we need to bring in multi-stakeholder, true diversity representation to help solve these problems, from private banking to public markets, to private institutions, to nonprofit institutions, to individuals and entrepreneurs, and from artists and the indigenous world, and all across the world as far as the area of geographics come into play. We're very blessed to have that representation and an incredible following of people who are action-based, moving these things out into the world. So now moving into, and what happens with these is we water them a little bit, we nurture them, we let things flow, and then when they begin to take root, we put more attention on them and they become working groups, is what's happening with Patty's leadership today and the launch of the attention economy. So why the attention economy? A couple quick words, and then I'm going to hand it off to Patty to get going. When we talk about what our species' most imminent threats or opportunities are in the world, things come to mind, like certainly climate change, nuclear war, maybe CRISPR or gene editing, maybe things we may or may not be able to control in the near future, like asteroids coming in and hitting us. But what we're really focused on is how can we take these challenges and turn them into opportunities? And so when we take a look at social media and the search platforms and the breakdown of truth and manipulation of human behavior, these are really clearly risks that we're all becoming more aware of. And sometimes the most subtle of risks can be the most dangerous and the most destructive, especially when we talk about attention being more expanded and more valuable with negative information than positive information, because there's this strange thing with our species that actually puts more attention on those things. And then that gets valued in a deeper way in the marketplace, because the amount of time that our attention is in place is what creates the current currency of today's world. One final thought on this, to bring it back home through our friends of indigenous wisdom and original peoples, is when they look at this earth and they look at our species in today's existence, they see us as sleepwalking, moving from A to B and A to B back and forth, literally not here, and in a dream and in another dream. Our thoughts are incessantly in the future or in the past. And when we think about that in concept, we can realize and understand pretty simply why we are really easy targets, like shooting fish in a barrel for AI and social media that wants to hijack our attention to be able to profit from that. So when we talk about core systems thinking, and that gets thrown around way too much these days, as far as I'm concerned, the ultimate in core systems is our operating system of us as a species and our consciousness, and actually becoming awake and becoming aware of what we are doing so we can be more participant in this active dream. So Patty, off to you. Take it away with your lovely participants today. And I look forward to a rich conversation. Oh, one other thing. Stay tuned towards the end, because there's going to be a very special presentation. Myself and Steve Sheath, who is part of our leadership team, can be part of presenting our first award of Future Capital. Stay tuned to an absolutely amazing person.
Thank you, Lawrence. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see so many familiar faces and some new faces. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really pretty exciting that we're all here today. This has been about over a year in the making. And so I'm just, I just want to acknowledge that you're taking this time. So I want to thank you for your attention. So the timing for today's launch with COP26 was not intended, but it seems pretty serendipitous when we look at the news. Most of us have been following, world leaders gathering to make commitments about climate change, et cetera. And I was contemplating that 50 years ago, the Club of Rome publication, The Limits to Growth, was published 50 years ago. So I want to invoke the spirit of one of the visionary co-authors, Donella Meadows, because I believe we need to call upon the same combination of intellectual rigor and the wisdom of her consciousness, and then introduce emergency, because we don't have 50 years to wait for the world to catch up. So maybe we should start things differently this time by explicitly stating the things we never discuss. Donella said, if we haven't specified where we want to go, it is hard to set our compass. It's hard to muster enthusiasm or to measure progress. But vision is not only missing almost entirely from policy discussions, it's missing from our culture. We talk easily and endlessly about our frustrations, doubts, and complaints, but we speak only rarely and sometimes with embarrassment about our dreams and values. So in that spirit, and before we get into the business of attention, I'd like to invite everyone into exploring attention itself. Most of us don't think about our own attention. The word we've been using at Future Capital is consciousness or awareness. So the intersection of consciousness in time is attention. So we always like to start our meetings with a moment of silence. So we're going to start right now first with a moment of silence. And during this moment, I want to ask you all to contemplate something. Why are you here? It's such a powerful question. It could be, why are you here? Why did you join this meeting? Or why are you here in this life? Or anything in between, whatever arises in your awareness, write it down in the chat or write it down on a piece of paper, but crystallize it by writing it down. And so let's just close our eyes for a moment, because we always do this with our meetings. We always like to start with a moment of silence. And I am going to open our moment and close our moment with a bell. Okay, so you don't have to be thinking, should I open my eyes now? All right. Thank you. So why are you here? Explicitly surfacing your intention is a simple but powerful tool to stay focused on what you value. It's a living question that you can use anytime in your life, in any moment, even randomly or any other meeting or whatever you do. It brings your body and it brings your awareness and your attention into the moment. So why am I here? Why are we, Future Capital, here? When we founded Future Capital 2 years ago, it was our intention to help mobilize the finance community into investing in the SDGs. But how to do that? So our intention was to emphasize the power of consciousness, to raise awareness about the impact of individual consciousness on what we value and the choices we make, specifically with capital, how we personally align our spending and how we invest. So I will quote our fearless leader, Lawrence, just as a reminder of why we are all here. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are a guide for the redirection of a species that has lost its way. Consciousness drives each person's actions, and capital fuels those actions. If we are to meet the United Nations goals by 2030, the collective efforts and impacts of consciousness and capitalism need to be recognized, merged, and intelligently transformed. Thank you for those wise words, Lawrence. So the original Future Capital Group's tagline was co-creating conscious economies, with the intention of leveraging the power of consciousness and capital to make the world a better place. We've introduced over the last 2 years many programs to further this focus on this essential role of raising our awareness, becoming aware of our attention and aligning it with our values. Richard Barrett's Humanity Awareness Initiative, Lene Anderson and the Bildung Movement, Nalima Bhatt and Shakti Leadership, and Tim Kelly's True Purpose Leadership are just a few of the several programs that we've been sponsoring to facilitate this awareness. But you may be thinking, well, that's fine, but it won't get anything done. So here we are. COP26 is going on for the last couple of weeks. There's lots of news about alliances and accords and resolutions and commitments to reduce emissions. And those are the things, supposedly the outer expressions of getting things done. But what seems to be lacking is the focus of our attention. So below the outer actions of investments, contracts, resolutions, agreements, accords, there must be the power of commitment to the intention each of those represent. An alignment of our vision and values with our actions. It is in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment choices that those commitments are actually fulfilled. We each have agency for our own consciousness, for our own attention. And it is through conscious awareness of our actions in alignment with our visions and values that we're empowered. And it's through individual recognition and commitment that our global mission can be accomplished. So the attention economy is important because what is invisible to most of us is that every time we go online, we are spending our attention. We are making choices. And all of our activities online, all of our attention, meaning what you search, how much time you spend on a page, what you like, what you share, even what you're talking about gets picked up. All of this is captured, analyzed, measured, and subsequently monetized. We are the raw resource being exploited in this economy. Our attention is a limited resource. People used to call this the information age, but this isn't about information anymore. It's attention. And we each have agency over our own attention. So our attention is powerful because it shapes the reality of our moment-to-moment experience of life. Our attention shapes our way of being and our behavior. So if our attention is being tracked, measured, and monetized, and we have no voice in that process, well, that's why we think that this is something that we need to pay attention to. So this working group has its roots in an event we did last September when I spoke for about 5 minutes about the attention economy. It sparked curiosity with people, and they started asking me about it. And specifically, Chantaline reached out and asked for a paragraph that she could share internally at the UN. So fast forward, the UN did launch a yellow attention economy working group, and Chantaline will speak a little bit about that in a few minutes. Over the last year, you may have seen the movie Social Dilemma or Frances Haugen speaking on 60 Minutes about the Facebook files. So there've been so many whistleblower revolutions that have surfaced, revolutions. That's interesting. That's part of the whistleblower revelations that have surfaced to bring it to our attention. Not to mention our own direct experience of the January 6th Capitol insurrection, how online media's same underlying growth-based metrics are driving increased polarization. So it's something for us to really become aware of. And I think people are starting, because of all these things over the last year, it's very timely. I mean, I first mentioned it a year ago. Most people didn't even know what I was talking about. And now it's really up. And so I think it's just so important that we start to put our focus and put our attention on this fact that, you know, kind of this whole growth-based metric is driving disinformation without consideration for externalities like the well-being of our children, of our democracy, and our own agency over our personal behavioral data. That's what the attention economy and our current global economy have in common. They're both measured by a single metric, an underlying principle: unfettered growth. Growth-based economies are driving us as a species to extinction. So another good living question is, what is enough? It's something to ask yourself, and maybe just ask others once in a while. What is enough? Again, I want to invoke Donella. She also said, a change in purpose changes a system profoundly, even if every element and interconnection remain the same. Let me say that again. A change in purpose changes a system profoundly, even if every element and interconnection remains the same. So with Donella-inspired guidance, we need a clear vision. Why are we here? And a new principle and metric that represents our intention. What if we replace the word growth with reciprocity as a principle and as a metric? If all stakeholders are benefiting, then a system is sustainable and even regenerative. So try it on for size in your own thinking, in your own work, in your own world, and let us know what you think about that. So here we are today, launching the Conscious Attention Economy Working Group. And we're focusing on 4 primary areas. We know that there are many facets here, but we feel that these areas are really in alignment with our core mission. So one of the first things we're going to focus on is the advertising engine, the advertising business model at the heart, at the core of the attention economy. And Chris Durfler will talk to us about that. We're going to talk about technology. Technology has a point of view and how the container of technology really can further us or can hinder us. And Laquelle will be talking about some exciting opportunities coming up with technology. Chantaline will talk to us about the UN commitment to the yellow attention economy, how policies to support member countries will be drafted to promote online safety, well-being, and individual agency. And I just introduced to you attention literacy, which is really awareness about attention itself. And so that's a whole educational process that I think can start taking hold in the world, because we all have agency about our attention. And so we are empowered in this economy. So last year, when I started thinking about this, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the capital working groups that Keaton spearheaded. You know, how can finance become a force for good, which was how we all started. And I thought, what if the advertising industry became a force for good? So around the same time, I met Chris Durfler incidentally on Facebook, where he posted a message to that effect. So I private messaged him, and that's how we met. So it's kind of ironic and actually so perfect. And Chris was making a pitch to his company to shift their approach to sustainable media. And I thought about Hazel Henderson and her Ethic Mark Awards, and I introduced the two. Excuse me. So, so Hazel was, coaching us and Chris, and she's been a great support. And, by the way, Hazel Henderson has been speaking and writing for 40 years about things that we're only now getting around to discuss. And she used the term attention economy in her book, A Win-Win World, published in 1996. So I want to acknowledge and thank her for her ongoing support and membership. So this idea has been incubating for the last year. And today you'll meet a few members of our team, of our core working group. There are a few other members I want to acknowledge before we get started. Tiffany Wang from the Oasis Consortium, which they're focusing on ethical internet built with safety, privacy, and inclusion at its core. Matthew Stiles with the Conscious Advertising Network, which is a voluntary coalition of over 70 organizations to ensure that industry ethics catch up with technology. And Robert Gilman, who's an astrophysicist and longtime sustainability thought leader, he's agreed to become our advisor. And Robert is the founder of the Context Institute and the Bright Future Now Network, which is a community of systems thinkers committed to ushering in a new planetary era. And Chris and I are both members of Robert's program and network, and he is a mentor of ours, and we're deeply appreciative of his wisdom and guidance. So, and there's one other person I want to acknowledge, and that is Susan Davis and her visionary influence on the social investment industry, guided by principles of generosity, reciprocity, and conscious collaboration, which we hope this working group will embody. Her intention has been for her entire life to co-create a future that works for the highest good of all Earth. The KINS networks that she launched have manifested these principles into the world and have had tremendous ripple effects. So, Susan, we are standing on your shoulders. Thank you. So, I want to get on with it and bring on some of our presenters. And the first person I want to bring on is Chantaline Carpentier, who is currently the chief in New York of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And she coordinates input into the financing for sustainable development, science, technology, and innovation. She monitors the progress on the SDGs, and she focuses on partnerships and innovative financing to support enterprise, entrepreneurship, gender equality, et cetera. So without further ado, Chantaline, can you join us and speak for a few minutes?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So, sorry, I'm at the airport, so let me just take this out for now. Thank you so much, Patricia, for this. I think, and thank you, Lawrence and Heathers and everyone on this call, on this webinar. This can't be more timely. Last year, as I said, I'm at the airport, so sorry about that. When Pat mentioned this attention economy last year, it really puzzled me. And at the same time, I was writing this little piece for the chief economist at the UN on, because I had read the report, a transition is still feasible to achieve the SDGs by the Club of Rome. And what's becoming clear, though, out of that report was that we will not achieve the SDGs by using the same economic and financial system that we had. And that achieving SDG 1 through 6 would basically be at the expense of the environmental SDGs, so the planetary boundaries in their word. And so I wrote this little piece on colored economy. So basically, instead of Having people talk about the green economy, and it's one thing, and we talk about the recovery right now. We talk about, oh, we need to have a Green New Deal. That's usually in the typical way that it was done in the US, infrastructure building, which means job for men. And we see that in this pandemic that women have been affected more than men, and the youth have been affected more. So why not a purple recovery as well, which is the care economy and the feminized economy? And then why not the blue economy for our friends and sisters that live on islands that depend much more on the sea than they depend on the land? And then why not the creative economy or the orange economy? And so I was writing this and I thought, I should also put the yellow economy or the attention economy. And since everything else had a color, I gave it a color. And I thought yellow would be perfect for it, our attention. And so that was last year. I submitted the paper. I went to a summer school program that UNCTAD does on new economics and submitted the paper. And it was selected and published on the website. And then I submitted to the chief economist at the UN, suggesting that we start working group on each of these colored economy. There's also the social solidarity economy, frugal innovation, and circular economy. And so we've now finished the first draft of a brief on each of those. And now we're developing policy brief to help our country economists. We have 131 country teams, the UN in developing countries, to help our colleague help government to basically, as they look into the recovery, to not just look at the traditional economy, but look at the new economy. And then there is the yellow economy. And of course, it's a little difficult to sell because they all see all the big thing and they have a hard time to look at the yellow economy, which is a huge thing, but it's not right in your face. And especially since, in LDCs, these developed countries, sometimes 30% of the people are connected to the internet. But what happened in the meantime is that the chief executive board got hold of that, and the UN Secretary General picked up on in our common agenda on this issue of public good, and the fact that we had a mandate in Rio in 2012 to look at beyond GDP, and we've done some work, but not a lot on beyond GDP. And you will maybe not be surprised to learn that as part of the Beyond GDP at the Chief Executive Board, so all board members of the UN next week, the main theme will be Beyond GDP. So you talk about unfettered growth, Pat. This is to go beyond that. The UN Statistical Commission has already approved a system of satellite account that would look into environmental and social satellite accounts to value these things that are not valued in the economy. But what's amazing about what's going to happen next week, and I have to write the brief for my Secretary General, is that one of the three assets that the Secretary General specifically asked be included in the Beyond GDP is, of course, social asset, environmental asset, but the third one is digital asset. And in the digital asset, and here I'm going to quote, open bracket, our behavior patterns are being commodified and sold like futures contract. Government and others can exploit it to control or manipulate people's behavior, violating human rights of individual groups and undermining democracy. This is a quote from the UN Secretary General, September 2021. And so one of the things that all of the leaders of the UN will be looking at next week is this idea of including that digital asset and that free digital capturing and the services that are produced in exchange of the personal data that we put out there. So I need to board my plane. I will leave it at that, but just wanted to say that we welcome this working group that you're creating. We hope that we can have a lot of synergies and co-creation amongst the two groups.
Thank you so much, Chantaline. I'm really looking forward to working with you and the whole team over at the UN. And thank you for speaking to us from the airport. Have a safe flight.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chantaline. So now I would like to introduce Christopher Dörfler. And Chris is an advertising professional and director of innovation at Dentsu International, where he has helped lead efforts to reimagine the marketing ecosystem to be more ethical and sustainable. He is a passionate environmentalist who understands we are at a crossroads in our physical, mental, and digital realms, where a new ethos and new metrics are needed to judge success. So he brings this passion and understanding into the advertising world to help combat attention exploitation issues such as misinformation in order to bring to life a healthier internet culture. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Patty. It's a real, thank you, everybody. I'll just say before I start, it's a real honor to be here talking to you all and to talk about this. This is something that's been a passion of mine since I was a teenager. I was one of the first generations really to be raised with the internet. So I consider myself to be a digital native. And I think you'll be seeing that much more as time goes on. But with that said, I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second to make sure that everything is coming up properly. Presentation mode. All righty. And so Patty, just let me know if you can't see my screen, but if you don't say anything, I'm going to assume you can. So start off, right? So what I mainly focus on is the business of attention. There's many different facets to the business of attention, but one of the main ones, if not the main one, is the main one is advertising. But before going into specifically the advertising piece, just want to kind of level set on what the attention economy, who the stakeholders are, and why there needs to be this harmonization between all these different groups. And that's kind of where that ethos comes in, right? We need to have this shared understanding of where we're going, the values behind it, so that we can work together and allow each individual person, group, and entity to have their own agency to act on this, but in alignment with each other, right? That harmony piece. So just touching on a few of them here, the agencies, brands, investors, a lot of those, are the traditional advertising pieces, right? The individuals. But then you also have all these other groups, right? The activists and nonprofits groups, your humane tech, your media and data tech professionals. A lot of times, something comes to mind as Facebook, but there's a lot of them out there. Your publishers and content creators, who are actually creating all of this material that we end up seeing. Your governments and civil society groups, right? Or like the UN, like the US government and such. And then your schools and incubators, right? That's where a lot of this knowledge is coming from. And there needs to be a synergy between businesses and schools so that we can align ourselves on goals that will actually push the needle forward. And then, so then kind of moving into what I really, what I'm here to talk about is advertising, right? And advertising, this is something people I think understand, but don't understand as deeply as I think it needs to be understood. Is advertising the financial model behind the flow of most information on the internet. So it has a voice in what you are seeing, what you're interacting with, no matter who you are, where you live, whether or not you're even offline, because it still comes out in print, right? But there's always a piece of how advertising is affecting the flow of information and what you end up seeing. And as a result, also the technologies that are created to feed into that, the businesses that are started, the startups that are successful end up getting bought out, right? All of that is tied together in this connection between, what is the impact on the individual, and how are the metrics that we're deciding upon impacting what the world ends up creating, if you will. So this next piece here, I'm going to play a little bit of the video here, and I just want to give you a heads up. This is meant to be distracting, but this is a really great artist representation in my mind of one of the dystopian paths, right? It doesn't need to be this, but the idea here is we're at a pivotal moment in the future of humanity and our
Más tarde, Asegúrate si quieres una buena calificación.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo.
¿Has pensado en correr? Es saludable y eficiente.
Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Yo estudié para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una monkey afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. ¿Te sientes inspirada? Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo? No, eso no es lo que quiero decir. ¿Para dónde voy? No. Puedo volver a empezar. Olvídalo.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo. Estoy libre de mi ira. Estoy libre de mi tristeza. El amor es mi experiencia.
Olá, me llamo María.
So I'll pause it there. So yeah, as you can see, that's a little bit of an idea of like how our attention can be absolutely overloaded in this Web 3.0 world as augmented reality, virtual reality starts to become more an integral part of our society. There's a lot that can, be somewhat of a, it can be seen as neutral, but it can end up in the end having a really profound impact in the negative. Cool. So kind of moving on from that, right? So misinformation, attention exploitation, your data exploitations, and things like that are rampant in our society. We've heard of, just the Facebook Cambridge Analytica situations, the January 6th insurrection in the United States, some of the genocide issues with the genocide in Myanmar, as well as issues in the Philippines related to the presidency, and how all of these things are affected. Advertising is fueling all of that. There's a lot of really great aspects to it as well, but the downsides are manifesting in these in things that are creating more ads versus more higher quality experiences, right? It's rather than adding value to people's lives, it's extracting that value from them. And a really important piece about that is that actually a little bit of a interesting thing, which people behind the scenes wouldn't necessarily know, is that's also bad for the advertising industry. The only really entities that tend to benefit from that are these monopolies, your Facebooks, your Google, who get to control the strings so that they can continue to make money off of it. But your brands, your agencies, your content creators, your individuals are oftentimes losing out because what they want is a quality experience. An advertiser is willing to pay more for something that's going to be a high quality experience if they know, that will happen. And so there's actually a synergy and alignment here that's going on that from the business side that people don't necessarily know don't necessarily know outside of it, and that Facebook and Google are also actually hurting this industry as well, and not just Facebook and Google, some of those others as well. But the end all be all I'll say is there is solutions to this, and it comes to somewhat reimagining how we go about advertising in the advertising ecosystem. So now just trying to go into, right, I'm a big proponent of solutions, right, providing leaning into the answers and not just focusing on the problems. So you may ask, all right, what does that mean? What is this new world, or what are the parameters of this new world to look like? And this is kind of just highlighting a bit pieces of it. But we need to view data privacy as a digital right? And I call it a digital right rather than a human right on purpose to say that we actually need rights tied to just our digital lives. We need to enhance individual agency and empowerment through our advertising. We need to develop a more intentional person and business systems design. And the word intentional is intentional there, right? That is meant to say that the individuals need to be leading that conversation and saying what they want to see and hear, and businesses need to be listening to that. We also need to reduce the environmental impact of data, and sorry, that's not supposed to say meta, like and content, right? So that's a little bit. Getting a little bit. Yeah, sorry. That's a script. So yeah, and then there's not only with the induced environmental impact. One of the things that people oftentimes don't realize is, one, the content we see actually has an impact on what we, the beliefs we end up forming to a certain degree, but also storing, housing, the exchange of all that data has an enormous electricity footprint and energy footprint. So keeping that in mind is actually really, really important to getting meeting our environmental goals. And oftentimes companies, their second largest expense after their employees is actually advertising, is their media. So for a lot of companies, General Motors being one of them, cannot tackle their environmental goals unless they also address their environmental footprint from their advertising. Some other pieces in here: be ethical by design, right? What's the technology you're building and what's the companies you need to start from that foundation? And then changing up the metrics, right? The metrics right now are based on grabbing attention. They're based on interactions. And we really need the metrics to be more about promoting well-being, right? What are those metrics that will lead to a healthier ecosystem so that we can design or we can use those as our metrics of success. Now, kind of going into some bits here, dispelling some of the common myths that people have. Myth number one, having a social purpose is not profitable. I mean, this probably goes without saying to most people here, but it is certainly, this is not true for the advertising industry. This is actually one of the industries that has the most to gain from having a social purpose, because it is the communications arm, right? And which means it has a vested interest in being authentic. If the communications that's coming across that are oftentimes, bad or not successful, come across as greenwashing, right? And that's not good for the company either. They don't want to be seen as greenwashing. They actually want to be providing solutions here. They need them to be relatively easy for them to do, which is part of what I work on, is making them easier. But they really do want to lean into this, and consumers or individuals, I'll say, will reward them, right? Trustworthiness has increasingly grown as a top metric for why a person chooses one brand over another. And so one of the things that I do is reframe the conversation to be about restoring trust. The advertising ecosystem needs to restore trust because it's traditionally not done that, or it moved in the opposite direction. Myth number two, privacy compliance isn't sexy. This is something that I run into a lot, and I actually try. One of the things I work on is to get people to think of privacy compliance not as the barrier, but actually as the window to understanding people. Right? Privacy is really understanding privacy is really understanding people. What is personal to them? Why does that matter? And why do we need to do that? And so part of that process actually gives you a greater understanding of these people you're trying to reach and a greater ability to reach them. And so privacy compliance certainly is sexy. And that's one of the things, privacy compliance folks in my company tend to really like me because I'm the person who comes in with a lot of energy on it. Just seeing that, but it's unfortunate. I think it should change, or it is changing, I should say. Myth number three, empowering individuals to have more control over their media experiences is zero-sum game for businesses. Now, I can say this from personal experience. This is completely not true. And as an example of this, the data that an individual creates, I can verify it and I say, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to be the one making the money off of it. So I will verify, add more data into it. I'll pull extra pieces into it. I might even answer some questions and say, yes, this is who I am. This is what I want to see. That ends up creating a much richer data source for the advertiser to say, okay, now I don't have to waste a bunch of money just putting out advertisements that are going towards supporting, websites that are not productive. And I get to actually reach this person and understand them. And then the person gets to reap the benefit of either A, controlling what they do or are comfortable sharing, if they're comfortable sharing anything at all, and perhaps even hopefully making money off of it or contributing it to a cause of their choice. So it actually is a win-win-win situation for all parties involved. Myth number four, leading media businesses and brands are not interested in this. It's something I'm, again, very, very fortunate to be able to speak very closely to. They are extremely interested in this. I can't go into it because I'm under NDA, but I work for P&G as one of my main clients. And so I can at least attest to the public pieces that they talk about. And they very much are truthful when they say these things. The company I work for, Dentsu International, was one of the first, I think, 5 to 10 companies to create science-based targets for climate change that are based, science-based target to reach actually 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? So a lot of these changes from businesses are actually being led by the media industry from behind the scenes. Here's number 5. And this is meant to be like a little bit of overload of logos, but the idea that these practices are not scalable or sustainable or available is completely not true. All of these different companies, different entities are working in their own way. Some of them are startups, some of them are larger companies, some of them are doing it for 15, 20 years, some of it just started into the past few years. The lion's share, for example, is actually tied to the UN, and they do their own unique thing. But there are a lot of options here, and companies can lean into this. There's a lot of companies that are creating arms within themselves to do this. So these capabilities are available. You just kind of essentially to ask for how to lean into it. But one of the things I work on is specifically how do we make sure that the money from advertising, the money that the brands have, is being funneled into these partners who are actually creating a higher quality ecosystem, as opposed to people who are just able to meet our attention metrics and those kind of things. There's a greater aspect there. And so then, right, the problem is multifaceted, and so are solutions, right? So we just talked about some of the myths, right? So going a little bit into how do we actually create these solutions? And this is, I'm just going to touch on this a little bit because I could go really in depth in this slide. But one of the things that I've done for my company, and these are not exactly them, but has broken down this new system into what are the actual actions we need to take, what are the areas of the business that we need to adjust for. And so I'll just kind of highlight a few of these, which one is the investing piece, right? Who are we choosing? How are we deciding on them? How are we training people in a company to make these choices so that we are actually investing in sustainable companies and practices, right? Ethically managing data. Now, the ethical piece is up for interpretation. What does that mean? But without diving too much into that, I'll just say it's really imperative that we manage our data much more ethically than we are currently doing. And we need to lean into that as companies, any company, that has, is managing the data. Now, measurement practices that are enhance well-being. Now, this goes into, right, we have the investment part, the data part, what are we doing? Measurement is what are we using after the fact, right? What are we judging success on? Because currently those metrics in advertising are based on things like clicks and interactions. And as we all know, things that get people to click on things is not necessarily what is healthy for the entire ecosystem, right? This fourth piece here, the ethical technology. We need to be leaning into ethical technology. We need to be supporting it as companies. We need to be making sure that the companies that are creating advertising products that are ethical have a market for them. And then, but that's more so at the beginning stage as opposed to just in the side, right? Actually, I should make that clear, this is how do we support at the upfront, and then what are the technologies that we're actually creating as a company, right? Each individual company, whether you're large or small, what are the products that you're creating and how does that impact? And then I'm running a little bit over time, so I'll kind of go through this, but content creation, right? What is the content people actually end up seeing? One thing that came up to mind recently is the Netflix, right? With the whole transgender thing, regardless of where people stand on that, it goes to show how content does have a really profound impact on individuals, and our relationship to it is a point of conversation. This piece here, I won't touch on too much, but just to have this so you all can maybe perhaps look back at this. This is a bit of a framework, right? This is mapping it out, how this all comes into play. And the two things I just kind of want to highlight here are the data side, right? The individual ownership of data, individual empowerment of their data needs to feed into all of these different pieces. And then the well-being based metrics, right? Not necessarily things that are just tied to investment, but are tied to regeneration, right? Or I shouldn't say investment, aren't just tied to monetary gains, but are based on value-based gains. And one piece also that I'll highlight that is maybe somewhat unique where people aren't used to, which is, right, the business develops their sustainable strategy. They kind of lean into the consumer side or the individual side of it. They create a socially conscious message, and that's oftentimes where a lot of companies stop. They just kind of put the message out there and they hope it sticks. But a big piece of what's missing is what are the actual experiences you're creating and how are you bringing those to life? And that's a piece that is oftentimes missing in the conversation. And so my last slide here, the call to action, right? We're a very action-oriented group. We're meant to lead, be part of leading change and being actually more so a part of the change to help others lead in their own directions. So I'll just kind of touch on these. Educate yourself. That's something that Patty was really highlighting, but I'm going to throw it out there. Educate yourself specifically on your online attention, how you can use it, better control it, and understand how it's impacting you and the people in your lives. Where are the advertisements? What are they showing you? When you click on things, what is happening? And take note of that, right? Every behavior you have online is important. All attention economy stakeholders need to embody responsible behaviors. We need a globally coordinated approach. That's why we created this group. And then investors and businesses should develop and support sustainable media strategies. So I'm a little bit over, but I really appreciate your all's time, and I will stop there.
Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate your contribution and all the support over the last year. So excellent. So now I want to introduce Laquelle Marie. And hi, Laquelle. So
Hi.
Laquelle has just joined us, and she is just brilliant. She began her career in manufacturing, and she has evolved from doing some, Fortune 500 vertical manufacturing solutions into, using her experience to produce hyperscale solutions for achieving the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. She is an innovator, a technologist. She is a brilliant person, and we're really excited about having her as part of our community. So take it away, Laquelle.
Thank you. And actually, synchronicity, I'm next to the airport, not in the airport, but we're all flying off into this grand transition. So apologies for the background noise. I think you asked a really important question. Why are we here? And one of the reasons that I really think it's important to be here is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, how everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. The current model of the internet is broken. And it's actually during the pandemic, which the Mental Health Foundation had shared about 68% of people are suffering anxiety just from the overstimulation of that, exposed many of the vulnerabilities that are in a more rampant way. So a little background, because this will, it's really more a context. It's really valuable, and where I want to make sure that the information here is valuable to you is that how this connects, how does Web 3.0 connect to the attention economy? When you think about the attention economy, the core problem is actually about the ability of our generating more information than actually being able to manage that information. And much of technology is a reflection of our values. Whatever we architect, maybe it doesn't matter at the beginning, but at scale it does. And this is something that the former Google design ethicist, Tristan Harris, he said behavior design can seem lightweight because it mostly is clicking on screens. But what happens when you magnify that into the entire global economy? So 5 years ago, I was working with Dan Mapes, who is the inventor of the current international standard protocol for Web 3.0, which I'll get into in just a second, and Marcos Campos, who's the head of AI autonomous systems for Microsoft, on Web 2.0 is a reflection of our values because it's extractive. Manufacturing and the industry of the Industrial Revolution made us more cogs in a machine. And the machine was to generate capital. And being on the back end of manufacturing, seeing directly how that worked, it was actually something that made me want to go into different industries. So when being in Hollywood or the music industry and actually helping social media influencers, it became so apparent that actually it was the exact same thing, except more disturbing because people have been productized. So much of when we think about toxicity, toxicity is biconsequential to imbalance. And when we think about abuse as a definition, it's just the misuse of power. And unfortunately, in many ways, people are just they're just a byproduct of a broken system. Not to say that people are bad or good, it's just that the system needs to change. So 5 years ago, we talked about how do we architect these solutions to disrupt the values and really start from values first so that we scale the values. So there's a little evolution here of Web 2.0, Web 3.0, and what does this mean for you, and what is this transition, and how does this actually relate to your future and your life, and the call to action for yourself. Web 2.0, as Facebook was a great use case multiple times over, was extracting people's data. So it's kind of a tale of two problems with Web 2.0. Our current World Wide Web has this bilateral relationship between consumers and producers. And that's not a plane. Now we're about to take off on a motorcycle, sorry. But this was at the time that, and I'm actually having a hard time focused with it, so I can't even imagine where your attention is right now. But the point being is that there is this shift happening from the material into more of a attention-based economy, as Christopher was saying, as Patricia was saying. And where is our agency in that? Where is our ability to navigate a world where it's overstimulated? So even right now, it's all meta, right? So one thing is that in many ways, when we think of self and agency, that creates an empowered life. And when we think about AI or tech and actually embedding values that can enable those us to have more agency, then they become an empowered facilitator. So Web 3.0, how is it different from Web 2.0? What does this mean? What does this all mean? Web 2.0 is a broken system. How? Well, if you think of, and apologies. This is such a good example of what's going on in the world, so much noise. So the Web 2.0, current World Wide Web, it's like if our body could not communicate to each other. We have our heart, we have our organs, we have our brain, we have all these things, but they're not communicating to each other. So of course it's going to create imbalance to the whole body. What's unique about Versus in particular, the international standard protocol to which a lot of things will go to for Web 3.0 is it has a new AI framework. And it's a holonic AI framework that's actually biomimicry for nature and trying to actually say, hey, let's create a nervous system for the world. Let's help actually communicate all different aspects of the world together so that we're actually working more symbiotically because it's all interconnected. So there was actually another value that relates to our rights. And I wanted to just point out that someone in the chat had mentioned we should have digital Bill of Rights. Ryan, please check out the book, Architecture of a Techno-Democracy. And then Jan and Gil talking about how it's overwhelming, the idea of what Christopher shared. And if we're not mindful, or if we don't use, as Patricia shared, the powers of values like love. And a good example is Martin Luther King, how he actually gave a more pragmatic framework to that, about power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. We are interconnected as a global family. So really being here is to advocate actually the architecture of the values that are in place with this new international protocol that is one protocol of the future as a spirit, as a beacon of hope, actually, for a way for us to reduce the noise, a way for us to actually find relevance, find more meaning, because the actual shift from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, and it's reflective of our values. Web 2.0 in the consumer marketplace is saying, search outside of yourself to define your value. Search outside of yourself, search. But with these new frameworks, with these new mechanisms, it actually shifts from searching to discovering. This is a great shift from the Industrial Revolution. Let the AI go into places that are actually occupying the cog in the machine that can actually help us unlock our humanity and help us unlock what does it mean to be human. It's one of the only technologies that has actually made us face our moral dilemma of who are we and what do we want and how do we achieve the greatness that we want for ourselves and together. And there's kind of a myth there because McKinsey even reported about how AI is actually producing 3 times more jobs than it's destroying. It's a myth. It's because a lot of the advertising model right now is extractive. It's trying to get your attention. It's trying to stimulate fear. There's a lot of things from the older model that are really from a place of preying on insecurities and on vulnerabilities. So when we talk about conscious capital, when we talk about conscious engagement, and we talk about how do we actually get our agency back, you know, a few people really can make a difference. And these kinds of convening, these opportunities for us to come together and do a little bit of knowledge sharing, as well as some general call to actions, can help us mobilize and co-author with our collective volition what is the future we want to produce. Let's work on producing that now. So it's a real honor to be able to be here and be able to say that this is the time for us to come together. And so I want to share Tiffany and Travis, who are in the thread. They've been working really hard on what we've been working with an SDG engine. We have we work with the executive board member from the United Nations of Association, and here we are. We're faced with all of these problems. But guess we're advertising now, and all of these mechanisms are driving our attention. It's towards fear. It's towards fear, and it's actually growing a lot of our mental health issues. You know, 1 in 5, according to the Mental Health Foundation, have mental health issues. What are the remedies for that? You know, we need to be more interconnected, just like our body. We need to have everything speaking to each other. We need to be able to actually reevaluate what are the values we want to steward moving forward. So there's a couple ending points that are really more from a place of what do we do now, and what does this mean with Web 3.0, and what should you expect? There are actually incredible mechanisms that have been architected intentionally on how can we disrupt the current value system and create ways to unlock humanity through new tokenomic models, through the spatial awareness of, there's one model that Christopher was showing, that if we don't direct the values, will actually be reflective of the old world of just capitalizing on return. But there's so many new mechanisms and vehicles of where we don't have to compromise the return of impact at all. We can have return of investment and return of impact. That's a regenerative model. This Web 3.0 solution actually allows the transition to happen for us to help each other. It shifts from personalization, which is extractive, to personal, from searching outside of yourself to discovering your life. It flips from a B2C model. Sound the alarms, because now we're going to a C2B model when you're decentralizing all of these capacities. So I almost feel like if it's too loud, I'll look at the chat. Okay, never mind. Someone was just wanting to sound the alarm that it's time to actually take action, because there is a decentralizing mechanism for us to actually be empowered. And actually, really at the end of the day, when we're talking about the attention economy, there is not attention as a scarcity. How much of your time are you actually taking for yourself to step away, to ask yourself, what are you paying attention to? Because we need to pay attention to what we pay attention to. It is so critical that we're actually spearheading values at the front line of anything we're implementing with technology that is bringing anything to scale, because it has global implications. And we're at such a vulnerable time that we almost have to be empowered to know that our individual differences, our individual input into a system like that, collectively at scale matters. It doesn't seem like it, but we really do have unique capacity. So I want to thank you very much for your time, as well as say, end actually with a prayer to humanity. And it is twofold, because they are really beautiful. And it is a time for us to really empower each other. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we seek to be consoled, not consoled, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For in giving we receive, in pardoning we are pardoned, and in the dying we are born again. This is a great rebirth. This is a renaissance. In this rebirth, let us be reborn and know that in the giving mechanisms of Web 3.0, we will be receiving new opportunities for us to steward a new life, a new way, a new hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laquel. And as Sharon Joy pointed out, we were receiving the signal in the midst of the noise, so not to worry about any of that. Everyone really appreciated your ability to share your thoughts about all of this. So thank you so much for your prayer and for your attention and your brilliance. So at this point, I would like to hand the hosting over to Lawrence, because we have a important Lifetime Achievement Award to offer, and I'm super excited about that.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you everybody for sticking around. And thank you for our beautiful speakers today, and Patty for that absolutely beautiful introduction of the depth and meaning of purpose of not only why we exist, but why everybody else exists, and why this working group is so critical. So thank you for your leadership on this. I also mentioned briefly that there'll be some really fun, deep upcoming interviews that we'll be having with, like, Tristan Harris and Dana Schmuckenberger, and even Mr. Mapes. And so more to come, and we'll get a lot of the thought leaders in this space to continue. So thank you for your time and attention today. And now it is my complete honor to award Miss Susan Davis, our first Lifetime Achievement Award at Future Capital. And I will read first what this says, and I'm going to have a couple remarks about Susan and tell a quick story and then open it up to Steve Sheaf to actually add with this. So congratulations, Susan, well-deserved. I will talk in a minute about what this is. What it says on it is Future Capital Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Susan Davis Mora, the godmother of social investing. And it's dated November 9th, 2021, which just by chance happens to be Susan's 80th birthday the other day. And I was honored to be able to present this earlier on her big birthday call yesterday. So before I do any formal remarks and then hand it over to Steve, I'd like to just mention when I first met Susan was way back on an IONS meeting, but then as time would work, we were brought back together actually by Steve Sheaf. And I had a call one-on-one with Susan, as I was having with many, many people at the outset of Future Capital. And I told her what we were doing, and she said, "Are you kidding me?" She said, "Consciousness and capital in the same sentence and at the UN, I love you." And what I realized instantly with that conversation was it really truly had nothing to do with me. And there were so many legends that had been hacking through the bush with machetes and clearing the way. And there was something magical that was happening that started, I believe, a few years ago in earnest, where all of a sudden we're all out in this big meadow coming out from the deep forest and looking around and looking at each other and saying, "My goodness, thank you for all the work you've been doing for so many years." And I am just a youthful person in this whole movement. And there's others like Steve Sheaf, who I call the godfather of social investing, who will tell a story about Susan. But now to a little bit more formal remarks briefly. Susan has dedicated her life to serving humanity and giving nature a voice. Her life is an inspiring legacy of courageously challenging boundaries and expanding, yes, higher consciousness, Susan. She has broken through perceived limits and broken down barriers to empower women, minorities, and indigenous original peoples. Recognizing the cascading benefits of nature, she has been a champion of biomimicry and biodynamically aligned sustainable regenerative businesses. She graduated Brown University cum laude in 1963, and I tease her that was a year after I was born. And Susan, anytime that you want to come up with your video, that would be great, especially if I can make you blush with statements like that. In the late 60s, she wrote The Executive, a publication at Harvard University's Center for Studies in Education and Development. In the 70s, she launched 3 publications: Boston's first Black newspaper, now the Boston Banner, and a professional women's newsletter called The Spokeswoman, an entrepreneurial magazine called Minority Enterprise. And as vice president of Chicago's South Shore Bank, she created the national legislation to manifest the Neighborhood Development Bank industry, which funded the restoration of Chicago's South Shore community. In the summer of 1979, Susan sent out a letter inviting 113 exceptional Chicago women to the first meeting of what became the Chicago Network, calling together distinguished women by their achievements in business, arts, and government and academia. Today, 40 years later, the Chicago Network members are more than 500. And fast track into the 80s, Susan served as vice president of Personal Trust Group at Chicago Harris Bank, where she focused on empowering women of influence. She was the first woman on the founding board of the Social Venture Network, which gave birth to the social investing industry. In the 90s, she founded Capital Missions Company with the goal of transforming the world of finance from fear and greed to love and joy through her key innovative network strategy, the KINS method. She founded several KINS groups, including the Investor Circle, the Destiny Funding Circle, KINS for All, the Capital Circle for Women Investors, the Solar Circle, and many more. And she is just warming up with KINS. Marion Rockefeller Weber, a major contributor to KINS Networks, gave her a grant to become a flow funder in Ecuador. From a $60,000 initial grant, they were able to donate more than 1 million in measurable value to the village. Today, she continues as the co-founder, president, and chief inspiration officer at Kinship Earth, this nonprofit. And as I said, she is just warming up with that work with her new friend Lauren heading things up. And again, Susan, from the depth of my heart, we appreciate you and all the work that you have done to make our jobs a lot easier going forward. Steve, would you like to say a couple words?
It would be my pleasure. Thank you, Lawrence. Heather, can you put Susan on screen for us?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
Love to be able to see you this morning. Okay. Susan, you may need to click on, you may need to make your video live at your end, Susan.
Okay, I'm supposed to unmute and then.
There we go.
And then show your video.
We can see, we can hear you now.
How do I start my video?
Yep, just start your video.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Excellent.
Oh, two old friends. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. My God, we've had a lot of life together, haven't we?
So Susan, let me just say a little bit more. Lawrence did all the, the formal stuff, all of the, the kind of the bio, the resume stuff. But I have the privilege of not only wishing you a very, very happy birthday, but also sharing my experience of you just very briefly with this amazing group of people here. So I was fortunate to have been, to have waded into a very shallow pool of early adapters to the radical notion that investors could do well and do good, that we could, make money and make the world a better place in 1989. And Susan was already there. And she was, one of the bigger tadpoles in the pond, in fact, as you've heard from the incredible life story that Lawrence just shared with us. Susan, you are a visionary. You always have been. Your focus on generosity and reciprocity and conscious collaboration. And you are the first one, at least for me, that planted the word consciousness in my consciousness as it related to money, and to how we as human beings interact with this amazing tool that we call capital. You were kind of, you operated at, and you always have, and I'm sure you still do, you operate at both a head and a heart level. So I see you as the defibrillator that jump-started the heart connection that investors now have with money as it relates to creating a better world. And I just want to thank you for that. And, going back to the question that Patty asked us very early on during this webinar, why are you here? What is your purpose? You helped me find mine. And I want to thank you. I also want to thank you for, the way that you started, creating a community of investment professionals, investors, asset owners back in the 80s. And I borrowed some of that as I moved on and for 20 years ran the SRI and the Rockies Conference, and which became SRI, the SRI Conference.
Right.
And a couple of the things I borrowed, you may not even know this, but you planted the idea of popcorn presentations in my mind. And for those on the call who don't know what those are, we very successfully used them as a way to spotlight sponsors at the conference. They would pop up, do a 3-minute something or other about who they are and what they're all about and how exciting it would be to work with them, and come see us in the exhibit hall. And that was a Susan Davis idea that just worked so well. I also borrowed the idea of topic tables, which again became a really important feature of the conference that I ran for a long time. I walked away in 2017 at the end of an 800-person conference. And the topic tables were kind of a central thing. It was a place for people to sit down with other like-minded folks, talk about a particular topic that really jazzed them, very much like this conversation today. It was a way to galvanize and focus attention on things that were really important to certain people at that moment, to cross-pollinate, to create collaboration, and spinning out of that is an incredible number of initiatives, way too many to count or to try to tabulate over the years. So Susan, thank you, and congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to say one thing, which is out of my whole effort with transforming finance, my theme was our strategy is generosity. Now, that's never mentioned in finance because, of course, that's impossible and craziness and all of that. But through my own track record, I have proved that the strategy of generosity works for all, particularly Earth. So I just wanted, if there's one thing you want to know that I say it's proven that by behaving with generosity in finance myself, I've proven all the initiatives that I've started, they've all succeeded because we all use the strategy of generosity. So I just had to say that because that's why I'm alive.
Fabulous, Susan. And Susan, you are a perfect example of what we talk about as the future of capital, which is really your reason for being here and living that regardless of what other people think, and plowing ahead during the hard times, during the tough times of life, and having that light ahead of you and knowing who you are and aligning your being with your doing and forgetting about what other people say about you. And you are such a perfect example of what we hold deep in our hearts and what we hope the rest of the world can see and model. And thank you for being.
I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much. I'm so happy.
Thank you, Susan. And for everybody else, this will mark the end of this call. Please stay tuned. And as we've said, for any of you who have these passions in life of making the world a better place and the things that you're looking to do to make the world a better place, please feel free to reach out to us for the attention economy or any other things that you're working on to make things better. Patty, would you like to say goodbye and any final thoughts other than what's coming up with some of the future interviews?
I just want to say happy birthday, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are a light to all of us. We're standing on your shoulders and we appreciate you so much. And also thank you all for your attention. It's been really exciting for me to be able to bring this forward, to actually kind of plant a seed, and I'm excited to watch this whole movement grow. And we have some amazing people who are already involved. And if you're interested in collaborating or contributing, please feel free to reach out to me at info@futureofcapital.org or patricia@patriciaclower.com, either way. And so anyway, thank you all so much for your attention. Have a wonderful day. And in the future, we are going to have some more events that are going to highlight some people who are, doing amazing things in this whole space, like as Lawrence mentioned, Tristan Harris and Daniel Schmachtenberger and Dan Mapes and others. So we're really excited about this whole program and all of the momentum that is coming forward with it. So thank you all.
Thank you. Make it a great day.
Bye-bye.